My Fantasticos, it's Lynda Hunt, here to read you the next installment of Fish in a Tree for Global Read Aloud. So I'm going to read you chapter 42, which happens to be one of my favorite chapters, and also there's something about this chapter that is unique to me as an author. That is something that has happened in this chapter that has never happened in any other chapter that I've written. So I'll tell you about that later. But then I will answer some questions, as I've been doing every week. However, I'm going to hold off on a few things still because there's still some spoilers to be had. I don't want to spoil anything. Next week, which is our last week, I will spill all the beans and answer all kinds of stuff. So let's jump in. Chapter 42 is entitled The Gifts of No Excuses, Scotch Tape, and Antibiotics. Mr. Daniels calls me up to his desk. Here, I have something for you. I'm excited until I see it's a book. Not that I hate them like I used to, but they still scare me. I stare at it, hoping he just wants to book talk it, not have me actually read it. I'd like you to read this, he says. I open my mouth to speak, my mind already rolling out multiple excuses. He puts his hands up. Listen, Allie, I know it won't be easy. I know it will take time. But the thing is, my excuses become harder to say. I think you can read this one, and I want you to try. I reach out and take the book, which has a picture of a kid holding a goldfish bowl. I flip through the pages. The book isn't long as far as chapter books go. That's a relief. I look up at him and hold his gaze. Normally, I'd be giving him all kinds of reasons I can't do this. But the thing is, Mr. Daniels could hand me a book as heavy as a boulder, and I'd try to read it. Just because he asked me to. Time space. Okay, we are going to begin our unit on persuasive writing, Mr. Daniels says. So, if you'd like to tell me, if you could have an unlimited amount of any single object, what would it be? It can't be magical, have special powers, or anything like that. Just an ordinary, everyday type of object. Well, obviously, Shay speaks slowly, like she's talking to a little kid. Wouldn't everyone just choose money? Albert looks confused. Not something I see too often. The first thing I thought of was antibiotics. Really? Mr. Daniels steps forward, putting his hands in his pockets. There are many who can't afford medications, so I would like to give them out to people who need them, all over the world. Then he seems to be thinking out loud. I wonder if antibiotics would help or hurt alien life forms. Well, Shay sputters, if you had an unlimited amount of money, you could just buy the medicine, right? I catch her rolling her eyes at Jessica. He shrugs. I'd rather just have the medicine. Scotch tape, Oliver yells. I'd want Scotch tape. Most of us laugh along with him. And why is that, Oliver? Mr. Daniels asks. Because it's awesome, that's why. Because people don't think how tough life would be without Scotch tape. Mr. Daniels nods. You may have a point there, Oliver. Or Elmer's glue. I love Elmer's glue. If I had barrels of it stored up in the garage, I could cover my hands with it every day and then peel it off. I love doing that, and it grosses out my mom. I tell her it's skin. Shay makes a noise. What? Oliver asks her. That's ridiculous, she says. What's ridiculous? He asks. The opinions of others are to be respected, Mr. Daniels says, but Shay and Oliver just talk right over him. Wanting tape and glue, Shay says. No, it isn't, because I would use them with paper to make notes for my little sister. They make her feel better. Make her feel better? Mr. Daniels seems concerned. Is she ill? Oh, not anymore, but she had something that was called, well, it was long. It had like 5 syllables, and she had to go to the hospital a lot to sleep over. And when she'd go, I'd visit her and bring cards, and they made her happy. My mom says I was the one who helped her get better. I see. Well, Oliver, you get huge creativity points today, Mr. Daniels musses his hair. You're one of a kind. You know that, Oliver? Suki raises her hand. Grandfather says everyone is unique, special, and unlike all others. That makes us each great. I like that, Suki, Mr. Daniels says, and you are indeed great. She remains seated but bows a bit. Thank you, sir. Mr. Daniels bows back and then stands up straight. In fact, you are all great, my fantastic fantasticos. Albert raises his hand, and Mr. Daniels nods toward him. Albert says, "Excuse me, but just because something is unique, that doesn't mean it's good. After all, E. coli, a dangerous bacteria, is unlike all others." Point taken, Albert, but I do like that people all over are different. What if we all looked the same, thought the same, had the same beliefs? That sounds boring, Keisha says. Indeed it does, he says. I think that I wouldn't mind being more like everyone else, but I think I wouldn't want to draw like everyone else, and I wouldn't want to act like Shay or Jessica. All of a sudden they were screaming. It is Oliver. Ant murderer! Ant murderer! What is it, Oliver? Mr. Daniels asks. He points at Shay. Ant murderer! All I did was step on a dumb ant. What is he so freaked out about? You had no right to kill him. He was just walking by. You think it was a him? It's just a dumb ant. Who cares? I care, Oliver says, getting down on all fours with a tissue to check on the ant, which is clearly dead. He cleans it up with a tissue and slips it into his pocket. You're going to keep it? She sputters. Well, I'm not going to just throw him in the garbage. I'll bury him at home. She begins to laugh. Shay, Mr. Daniel says, there will be none of that. And she stops. We are all different. You care about some things, and Oliver cares about others. We have to work to accept each other, even though we may not agree. Yeah, Oliver yells. And Oliver, Mr. Daniel says, I think you have to cut Shay a break here. It's pretty common for people to step on ants. So, Oliver, he asks and waits. Oliver turns to Shay and mumbles, sorry, and climbs back into his seat. Thank you, Oliver. Mr. Daniels wanders over to Oliver's desk. I'm glad you apologized, and now that you have. He leans over and rests his hands on his knees. I'd like to add that you have one of the kindest hearts I know. You care so much about everything, always looking out for others, and that, my fine young fellow, is going to make for a great man one day. So that's the end of chapter 42. Lots of goings-on in the classroom, and as I said, it is a unique chapter in my career because I have heard from some people that have shed some tears while reading this book, and I have heard from some people that have shed some tears while reading this book. However, as a writer, I don't tend to cry while I write, and I think it's because if I get too emotional, it almost dilutes it on the page. It's like I have to stand just outside the emotion to get it on the page well. However, this chapter is the only chapter that ever made me cry. And I think that's surprising because a lot of people would not consider this to be the most moving chapter of the book. However, it's the ant murderer scene. That's what made me cry. And it's because of the back, or the end, that when Mr. Daniels is saying, you have one of the kindest hearts I know. You care so much about everything, and that, my fine young fellow, is going to make for a great man one day. That reminded me of my son, because when he was 3 or 4 years old, he loved spiders and arachnids and insects, and we weren't allowed to ever kill them, but we had ants in our kitchen for a while, so I'd have to capture them on paper. I spent the whole day capturing ants on paper and carrying them outside. And now he's all big and taller than me, and he's still in high school. He's not all grown up, but I don't know. I must have thought of his little boy days. I think that's what happened, and that's why I started to well up and cry a little bit. There are a couple of things in this chapter too that I referred to a book that had a goldfish bowl on it, a boy with a goldfish bowl, and this is the book. Now, I believe that I showed this to you a while back. This is the same version that my 6th grade teacher handed me. And so I had Mr. Daniels hand Allie the very same book. So the modern cover, I don't think, has a goldfish bowl on it. So it was kind of a little nod to Mr. Christie there, my 6th grade teacher, that I put that in there. And let's see. Can I just say once again that I love Oliver? I am thinking about that book from, I actually don't remember if I've said this in Skypes or if I said this in the movie, but I have been thinking about a book from Albert's point of view. And if I ever do get to that book, it will be 2 years later when the kids are in the 8th grade, and Oliver will have a much bigger part in the book because I love Oliver. I really do love him. So, another thing that I think is important about this is we really see a difference in Oliver in this chapter, don't we, from the beginning? You know, I think in the beginning, Shay's words would have really shut him down. But instead, he just comes back and he argues with her. That is a huge difference. That's a huge difference. He is finding that her words are not as powerful as he originally thought, and that his own words have power. So, I do. I like that chapter. I like that Aunt Murder thing. I know it's a strange thing for a person to say. All right. You guys get the real me. What can I say? All right. So, a few things on my questions list. First of all, during this block of reading, you have now seen Albert's room and Albert's house. That poster on the wall used to be in one of my kids' rooms. And while I wrote the book, I based it on the poster that was then upstairs. Once it landed in my book, and I was looking for something for that big empty space on the purple wall, I got myself another poster, put in a frame. So that is, that's Albert's poster right there. I've been getting a lot of comments on Twitter about Mr. Daniels being a substitute teacher. And I can totally understand that because Mrs. Hall left and Mr. Daniels came in. But he's actually not a substitute teacher. Mrs. Hall is left and she's going to be home with her baby. So Mr. Daniels is there for good. Just a little, thing there. And then I talked about chess last time. You saw a little bit more about chess this time and comparing the pieces on the chessboard to the characters in the book. Some people were asking me if I could be any piece, what would I be? And I guess most people would say the queen, because the queen is by far the most powerful piece. But I don't know, I think I would be the knight. I like the knight. I think the knight is clever. All right, the chapter, A Chicken, a Wolf, and a Problem. That was something I did as a teacher on Fabulous Fridays. I told you guys that at the very end of Fridays, I did Fabulous Fridays, and I did mystery boxes one time, and one of the afternoons during the course of the year, I would do this problem. And I thought it was really interesting, there'd be some kids that would really stick with the problem, really stick with it until they solved it, would ask kids next to them what they thought and, would make the pieces with pieces of paper all on their own and move them around and really try to solve it. And then there were other people that gave up easily. I think, I know that, if you want to get anywhere, you have to stick with something if it's hard. If it's easy, what's the challenge in that? I think if you stick with something that's hard and you're ultimately successful, you feel like really good about that. And I think that alone is worth it, as far as I'm concerned. That's what I think. All right, and some people have been asking me, are Jessica and Shay really friends? Are they really friends? And in this block here, we have seen, I think it was during the Chicken, Wolf, and a Problem chapter, where Jessica goes along with Shay, and Allie sort of thinks that she's not going along with her. She's going along with her out of fear. So I think that's the answer to your question. I think, if you agree with somebody out of fear, because you're afraid that they're going to turn on you, well, that's not a friendship. That's not a true friendship. That's not based on respect. That's not based on loyalty. True friends should be able to disagree with each other, and disagree without being unkind, because we don't all agree with everything, and that's fine. I disagree with my friends. I don't love them any less. We just disagree. I actually think it's interesting when I'm with people that feel differently about things than me, because I like to discuss things. I'm one of those people that goes out to dinner and conjures up these questions. All right, I like would you rather games and things like that. All right. In this block of reading, you found out why I named Allie Allie. Now, Allie's original name was actually Lucy, because I wanted her to have the nickname Lulu, because my real life brother Ricky called me Lulu when I was a kid. In fact, he still calls me Lulu. If he sends me an email these days, he'll say, "Hey, Lulu." And I'll sign emails to him, love Lulu. So the thing is I found a whole bunch of kids' novels that were coming out about the same time. Like 11 of them had a main character named Lulu, or Lucy rather. So I changed Allie to Allie because of the homonym that you have now seen on Albert's poster. Because Ally is the name Allie, but it is also the meaning for ally, somebody who is on your side, sticks with you. And I thought that was appropriate. All right, so I know I've addressed this a little bit before. People keep asking me, why is Shay mean? Why is Shay mean? Some people are just like that, unfortunately. You don't have control over other people. You can control how you react to people like that, but you can't control other people. However, this block of reading has given you a little bit of a window as to why she is the way she is. Because she has been treated like that. By her mother, unfortunately. And so she has learned, growing up, that that's the way you treat people. But as Keisha points out, because Keisha's very smart, that does not give her an excuse to treat other people badly. You don't do that. If somebody treats you badly, you don't turn around and pay that forward. I believe that you pay the good stuff forward, not that kind of stuff. Let's see. And then the letter. Some readers have asked me about the letter that Shay and Jessica put together that was supposed to be for Max, but it really wasn't for Max. And it was kind of to turn the inability to read on its head, have it be a positive, show a little bit of other personalities in the class, but to really show how cruel Shay can be. I mean, that is a very unkind thing, because if you think about it, if Allie had been able to read that letter enough and show up at the lunch table and say whatever it was that she was supposed to say to Max, maybe that she loved him or whatever, she probably would have ended up very embarrassed, and humiliated by the end of that exchange. That's what Shay was trying to pull off. And, I don't think it's a very nice thing to blurt out mean things, but to actually plan something like that ahead of time and write a letter and, to me, I was hoping as the author that would seem sort of like a wake-up call to Jessica and some of the other kids in the class, that, wow, she really is unkind, and perhaps in terms of looking for a friend, maybe I could do better. Hopefully Shay will learn her lesson, we'll see, or change, we'll see. And then, let's see, I think, well, actually, that's it. I've got a whole lot of things here, but I think that's it. So there are a couple of things that I will get to in the next video. I know there are some things that you've asked, but I can't answer them yet because they will be answered, A lot of you are very curious about Albert. Is Albert... some of you have been asking me, is Albert poor? Yes, Albert is poor. And that's why there's no food in the refrigerator. And, I am assuming that in real life that Albert and his family would be, applying for help and getting some help. But that is not included in the book because the book is from Allie's point of view. A sixth grader's point of view. And if she is not aware of something, then it could not be in the book because it's in first person. So since Allie would not be aware of that, because I don't think Albert would share that. Albert kind of, he keeps things to himself. So I don't think Allie would know that. They're the bullying with Albert. What's going to happen with that? I think that's going, we're going to have an ending to that storyline by the end of the book. We're going to find out what happens with Shay and Jessica and the other kids in the class. Is Shay going to come around? Is she going to be kind? Is she going to become friends with Allie? Is she going to do something nice for Allie? We're going to see about that. And then, well, that's all I'm going to say. Because I'm afraid if I keep talking, I'm going to give stuff away, and I don't want to do that. So, one more week, you got to wait for the rest of those questions to be answered. And again, very grateful you're reading Fish in a Tree. I really am loving all of your messages on Twitter. It's really, really cool. I have been traveling a bit. I'm home, but I'm leaving in about an hour to go to New York for about 8 days, so this will actually post while I'm not home this week. And I will answer as many Twitter messages as I can while I'm traveling. So, have a silver dollar day, you guys. I will see you very soon. All right, bye-bye.